Well, this dude's about to get roasted.
We're going to be analyzing scary airplane moments caught on camera. Are you ready?
Coming up. Hey 7-4 crew, welcome back. If you don't know me, my name's Kelsey. I'm a 747 pilot. My channel 7-4 Gear is all about aviation. I personally find it very entertaining when people who are totally uninformed, lack all common sense, make comments and explain things in aviation. So if you like watching people get totally roasted who lack all common sense and don't know anything about aviation, but explain it in a way that they do, you're going to enjoy this video. Let's get into it.
In the world that we live today, people commute and travel all the time from one place to another. And because of airplanes, things have gotten way much easier. Just so you have an idea, roughly 100,000 flights take off and land every day all over the world. However, like anything else in this life, traveling by plane has a price. Some people, for example, panic when they're in an airplane. Many things can go wrong, and sometimes it can get very much scary or even dangerous. And today, we're going to be analyzing scary airplane moments caught on camera. Are you ready?
Oh, I'm ready. In fairness to this guy, like a lot of my videos, this video is chopped up. I had to make it short because what he's doing is using a lot of different clips, and he does say in here statistically that aviation is safe and it is safe to fly, but he's doing it in a way that's designed to induce fear by the way that they're talking and the pictures that they're showing. There are a lot of people who are scared to fly, which I totally understand. You're not in control of the plane, or you don't understand the turbulence, or any of those types of things. And what happens is when people make these types of videos who don't know anything about aviation, it is designed to prey on people's fears and to make them feel even more nervous, because a lot of people, when they're trying to learn something or they're about to do something they're uncomfortable with, like let's say you hate traveling but you have to go to a destination wedding for your kid, right? Well, then you're going to be nervous. So what are you going to do? You're going to jump online and try to research some things about how to stay calm, and then you start researching things about aviation and planes, and then you end up on some guy's video like this, and he starts talking about all these different things in a way that's scary, and it preys on your fear and makes you more and more fearful. Now you should know that I fly mostly cargo. 98% of the flying that I do is just boxes, so it doesn't really matter to me whether you fly or not. I honestly don't care. But I think traveling is one of the best things that anybody can do in their life. You can experience different cultures, see the world, and things like that. So when I see somebody doing something like this that's making people scared to fly, I think, okay, you're making all these people uncomfortable to fly. I'm going to make you uncomfortable making these videos. So let's break down all the smart things this guy has to say about aviation.
On a Monday afternoon, passengers knew that there was something wrong when they felt the plane fuselage began to shake violently, and also heard popping noises coming from outside the Boeing 757 that they were in. This is when all of a sudden one of the plane's passengers observed that the walls were cracking open. This is what was captured on camera.
It's all on the inside. It's all on the inside. Yeah, you hear that noise?
At first, flight attendants were checking the crack on the wall, and they were saying that it was only on the inside. However, I feel that they were only trying to calm everyone down. The last thing you need on a situation like this is a passenger freaking out. This is when the plane pilot was called in to check on the problem, and he said that they should land immediately. They made an emergency landing and everything was fine. However, if they did continue with the flight schedule, there is a big chance that the plane would crack open in half. In your opinion, how would you react if you were on this flight?
So in your professional opinion, as a passenger, you feel the plane would have cracked in half. Is that correct?
There is a big chance that the plane would crack open in half.
Next time you get on a plane, I want you to notice, if you're sitting next to the window, I want you to notice that the side of the plane, the side that you're sitting on, the walls are plastic and they're sectional. They're little pieces that are all set up along the side of there. It has nothing to do with the hull or the outside of the aircraft. Those two things have nothing to do with each other. That inside area right there that you see next to your window, that's really just for aesthetics. On a regular freighter plane, meaning it's just boxes, we don't have that nice plastic coating there. Doesn't matter if it's loud, it doesn't need to be insulated, none of that stuff. There's also not wires and other things that are moving along those wall areas. That plastic that they're showing right there, that thing that's broken, that's just one piece of the sectional popping out from the second piece of the sectional. That has literally nothing to do with the outside of the aircraft. They're two totally separate things. As you can imagine, if you had one gigantic plastic piece that ran along the whole inside of the airplane as one single piece, it would be very expensive to make it. It would be very expensive to replace it. So what they have is different sectionals that are in there, which means that if they need to get into one section of the plane, they don't have to remove this gigantic plastic piece that all got built into one piece, which would be difficult to transport, difficult to install, difficult to take off when they need to do repairs and maintenance and things like that. So all those different sectional pieces is basically what it is. It's just a sectional piece of the inside of the aircraft, and the whole interior is usually made of kind of a tough plasticky thing. I don't really know, I don't design these aircraft, but that's basically what it's composed of. You can see here, this is just a clean line. Look right here on the line here, you'll see it's just one straight line, which means it's showing it's just one part of this completely separate piece right here. The outside of the plane, the hull of the plane, is not something you're going to be touching or being against. As you can imagine, it's very cold while we're flying up at 34 or 36,000 feet. So there's some insulation that's there. And it also helps reduce the noise. So having that there is part of just your comfort. Now there's a couple things to note. In the event that something like this happens, obviously the first person that's going to come look at it is the flight attendant. The passenger is going to tell the flight attendant, either the lead flight attendant or maybe the flight attendant with the most experience, they're going to come over and take a look and see what's going on. And they're going to do that so that way they can relay that information to the pilots, because we need to know what's going on as well. We're not back there. And I always talk about how important it is to have flight attendants that are willing to communicate with the pilots, and this is a great example of that. She's coming over to take a look at the situation, so then she can relay to the pilots, hey, this is what we have back here. This is what it looks like, or sounds like, or smells like, or whatever the situation is. Then from the flight deck, we can make the decision to go back there and take a look. You saw it was the captain that came back there, which is typically what it's going to be. The captain's going to go back and have a look and see what the situation is, so then they can make their determination of safety of flight or something like that. However, the guy who narrates this video says this.
And they were saying that it was only on the inside. However, I feel that they were only trying to calm everyone down.
Here's the thing to realize if you're a passenger. One, the pilots are on the plane too. We don't have a special parachute. We don't have a death wish. We're not doing anything that we don't feel is safe. So if there's something on there that we're looking at and we see that there's a big problem, then we're going to make an emergency landing. I'm 99% sure that this pilot didn't walk back up onto the flight deck, declare a mayday, 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 we have an emergency, and make an emergency landing. No, they probably made a precautionary landing. They would have seen that, okay, this is broken or whatever the situation is. They don't want the passengers there. Who knows what really happened? Or they could have just said, we'll just continue our flight. I had a situation like this years ago when I was flying just passengers. We hit some turbulence so bad that the ceiling panels actually fell down off the ceiling. The ceiling panels, however, have these wires that are there, so that way if they do fall off, they don't fall onto people. So we hit this really bad turbulence. We get a call from the flight attendant, said, hey, some of the ceiling has come down. Now, once we got up to our cruising altitude, I ended up having the flight attendant come up in the flight deck. I went into the back just to see what was going on so we could see what the overall situation was. Now, I ended up just, I think, putting the ceiling back up. If I remember correctly, it was a long time ago. I either put it up or I decided that it was only coming down a couple inches, so I decided to leave it there because it was hooked up with wires, so it's not a big deal. The thing that's important to know is that that plastic coming off completely off the ceiling has nothing to do with the safety of flight. So we continued the flight. We flew to our destination. I think we had like an hour and 20-minute flight, something like that, and we just landed in it. It wasn't a big deal at all. So it's important to realize that that plastic has nothing to do with the outside of the aircraft. It's also something that you may not know. The hull of the aircraft has leaks in it. So you might hear something or see something. It sounds like there's something that's going on where there's possibly a leak. Now, if you were to hear a big hole in the aircraft, the pilots are going to know. We're going to see that the plane is depressurizing. So the pilots in that scenario, that there's some big hole back there, we're not walking back there to be like, hey, what's going on? No. Everyone's putting their oxygen masks on, and now we're going to be getting down to 10,000 feet and trying to land as soon as possible. That's what's going to happen in real life. If there was a big hole, we're not walking back there like, hey, the plane's depressurized and all these things are happening. Let me just go see what this looks like. That's not what would happen. So when the narrator of this video says this,
they made an emergency landing and everything was fine.
I would say this guy's completely wrong, and it's highly unlikely that they declared an emergency and made an emergency landing. If anything, in my mind, based off of that, I probably would have continued the flight, unless I had like a 9 or 10 hour flight to go do, and then I didn't feel that it was going to be comfortable or safe, or there was multiple areas of the plane that had happened, and that would be more for the comfort of the aircraft. So usually what would happen is the pilots would go up, They'd get on the phone, they'd call the company, they'd tell them what's going on. Hey, we got parts of the inner part of the wall has broken open in a few different areas of the plane. What do you guys want to do? And then the company will make the decision. You know what? We don't want our passengers to be flying with part of the wall is broken or whatever the situation is. Just go ahead and come in and land at this airport, depending on where you are on your route of flight. However, that wasn't really a safety issue. If you're looking at it from that aspect, there's really no safety with that plastic being open. Even if that plastic came completely off, nobody'd be able to sit in that area, but it wouldn't be a big deal safety-wise. Typically, if you ever see your pilots coming back to look at something in the middle of the flight, it's more for curiosity's sake. If there's something that's a real emergency, we'll know. We have all the instruments up there. We can see the pressurization and all the things that are going on with the aircraft. So if there's a real emergency, we're not going to be coming back. There's times where we have to come back and look at the wings during the winter and make sure there's no snow or ice or things like that. Usually that is something that we have to do for safety reasons before takeoff. But once we get into flight, we can pretty much see everything. If there's something that's like this, we're coming back just mostly out of curiosity, just to take a look at it, just so we can see what's going on, communicate with the other pilot like, hey, this is a situation, and then we can relay to our company or our airline, hey, this is a situation that's going on, and then together we can make a decision about what to do.
At first it seems like a normal turbulence, and you can see by most people's reaction that they're not very much wowed by it. But it's all about to change.
Wow, bro. What is going on? What is going on?
Normally, when you don't have a good visual reason for a turbulence such as bad weather, it's because you have two different bodies of air moving at different speeds, and I guess this is exactly what happened to Justine Robinson's plane.
Okay, so turbulence ranks really high on people's fears, and I totally understand. It's like being on a roller coaster when it's not what you signed up to be on. I don't like being in roller coasters. Turbulence, however, doesn't bother me nearly as much as if I were to get on a roller coaster. If I was going to get on a roller coaster, you'd probably hear me screaming something like the people in this video, because I don't like doing it. Well, I probably wouldn't scream like them, but I would be upset that I'd made the decision to get on the roller coaster. Another thing to know is that your pilots, typically when we're flying, we don't want to be in turbulence either. We're up there so we can be talking, and if we're getting bounced around, our coffee's getting bounced around, maybe the book we're reading is getting bounced around, we can't do anything, and now we got to pay attention to what's going on. And like I've said, pilots typically are kind of lazy. We don't want to be doing all this work because that cruise portion of the flight, there's really not a lot to go on. We're listening to the radio, responding to the radio, watching some of the controls that are going on, but there's not a lot of mental effort that's involved in that situation. However, once you start getting into a bunch of turbulence, now you start trying to find out where the smooth air is, you're trying to change it to altitude, make a directional change, you're trying to do something to get out of that because nobody wants to be getting slapped around in the back of a plane. Realize that different areas of the plane, it's going to be worse. So if you might be sitting at the back of the plane, it's going to feel a lot more violent, the level of shaking that's going on, than in different areas of the plane. It's just going to be more uncomfortable for some people than others. I'm going to tell you a quick story about when I was flying this plane right here, and if you aren't familiar with it, this is a Dreamlifter. It's not a passenger aircraft. It's a modified 747 where they basically ripped the middle of the plane out and built this huge dome to take wings and fuselages of other aircraft inside it. She is a big girl, and that's a modified plane. It's not a normal, well-designed plane that's designed for your everyday passenger. So I was flying that plane a few months ago. We were crossing the Atlantic. We were headed out to Italy. And as we were crossing the Atlantic, we hit some moderate to severe turbulence. And what that basically means is you can't control some of the altitude variations that are going on. And what was happening is all the planes were getting diverted, and they were getting changed to different altitudes and different directions to get around this massive pocket of turbulence. We had Emirates with us, we were flying, we had a few other airlines that were nearby, and we're all getting vectored sent to different areas to get around this big pocket of turbulence. Air traffic control was getting all these reports from people. Now, obviously, when you're flying passengers, no passengers that are flying on Emirates aircraft want to be getting slapped around, their drinks are getting spilled, or whatever the situation is, you're not enjoying it, and it's the same for us. So I'm in a plane that's completely modified. That whole middle section of that plane's been ripped out, and we are getting slapped around a lot. The thing to realize, though, is that every aircraft has a speed, and at that speed, or range of speed, that when you're at that speed, that thing can take any level of turbulence abuse that you could ever imagine. I mean, way, way worse than anything you could ever imagine. I always talk about the safety margins that aircraft make and the designers make to make sure that these planes don't break apart in turbulence, and it is way beyond anything that you will ever experience as a passenger. So if you're ever in this really bad turbulence or feels like very bad turbulence, just realize it is really nothing as far as for what the plane can actually take. It's not a big deal. My point here is that it doesn't matter the airline or the type of plane or anything like that, you're typically going to experience turbulence if you're traveling a lot. Just the other day, I was flying over Greenland and we had a bunch of wind, I guess, down on the floor, and it was blowing up the wind just across the floor of the sea, up the mountains in Greenland, and it was getting up, and we were at maybe 34,000 feet, something like that. And so we were feeling it all the way up there. And it was pretty, I'd say, light to moderate turbulence, which for some people feels like extreme, this is so crazy. It was bumpy, but it wasn't that bad. And we were just flying across it. We didn't even change our speed. But you will notice that when you're flying as a passenger, for the most part, when you start hitting turbulence, you'll hear the engine start to come down or wind down a little bit. That's just to make the plane fly slower. The easiest way to explain it is, imagine if you were driving over a bunch of speed bumps. If you drove over those speed bumps really fast, it's going to feel a lot worse than if you were going over it a little bit slower. So typically the pilots will slow that down, and that's more for passenger comfort. I've talked about it a bunch. When I'm flying a freighter and we start to hit turbulence, unless it's so bad and we're going really fast, if those two scenarios, okay, fine, then we slow it down. Otherwise, we just keep going because the only people that are on there are pilots or mechanics, and they know everything that's going on, so we just go fast. Even if they're getting bounced around in the bunk area while they're trying to sleep, we just go, it's just bad luck. But when you're flying as a passenger, typically your pilots are going to slow it down, and that's just to make your ride more comfortable. Now, I mentioned before I mostly fly boxes, but sometimes I forget when I am flying passengers, and there was a time where we hit some turbulence where I didn't slow down the plane at all, and I forgot to put the passenger seatbelt sign on, and so one of the flight attendants in the back of the plane calls up and says, hey, it's really bumpy back here. Can you put the seatbelt sign on? And I was like, oh, oops, and then we slowed it down a little bit. So sometimes I forget, because for me, what my level of comfort is different from than what I understand a lot of people's level of comfort is. When I was flying passengers only, we hit some bumps, we'd slow it down, always, every time. But since I mostly fly boxes, sometimes I forget, okay, we need to really keep in mind what people's level of comfort is. And so you'll notice, if you ever hit turbulence, the planes will slow down a little bit. You'll hear the engine slow down a little bit, just to make your ride more comfortable. That's it. The plane is going to take any turbulence you could possibly imagine. It's going to take it and not even phase that aircraft at all.
All of a sudden, you look to your side through the window and you see an object, but you have no idea what it is. It's not a plane, it's not a chopper, it's not anything like you've ever seen before in your life. Well, interestingly, this has been happening quite a lot in the past few years, and to this day, 3 of these occurrences have been registered on camera. The first one was caught on camera by Kerry for Rides when he was flying over the Aegean Sea, and at first people thought that this was some sort of plane having problems with the exhaust system, which later was refuted that maybe it wasn't.
Just out of curiosity, what exactly is an exhaust system on a turbine engine?
And at first people thought that this was some sort of plane having problems with the exhaust system.
So while he tries to figure out what this alien spacecraft is, I'll tell you what a contrail is. A contrail is basically when an aircraft is flying based on the environmental conditions, meaning temperatures outside and a few other factors, the plane will leave a trail behind it. Doesn't always happen. So sometimes you can see 2 planes that are flying and they look kind of like at a similar place in the sky, but they'll be at different altitudes. And as you go up and change your altitude, the temperatures will change. So you could have 2 planes that look like they're flying similar, and one looks like it's spraying something or having a trail, and that's why. Different temperatures, different engines, things like that, you'll get 2 different results. That's called a contrail. Now that I've clarified that, let's...
I know you told your friend you're not okay, and tell me what's wrong and why you never said you felt that way. And guess you're trying to stay strong and fake a smile until I look away. But I've known you too long, it hurts to watch your blue eyes fade to gray as you fade away, as you fade away.
I was hoping I was going to be able to go through my life without having to explain this basic concept, but in case this guy who made this video ever ends up on this video, I guess I should kind of explain this. Imagine that here you have a plane that's flying away from you, and it has a contrail, the thing that I just explained earlier, where the trail's going on behind it. And then you fly along like this, and you're looking at this guy that's flying away like this, and you're flying along here. Isn't it going to look like that thing is moving? But it's just flying and you're moving, so it looks like it's moving. Is that the same as movement? No, that's not the same thing. So now with your understanding of what a contrail is and what I just explained about the two flights, does it seem like maybe that's what's going on instead of some crazy, dangerous thing that's in the sky? All right, let's see what other scary aviation stories this guy has.
Now, if there's one type of airplane that usually you'll find hundreds, if not thousands, of forced landings, it's a Cessna. And on April 25th, a Cessna 172 was forced to make an emergency landing on Highway 10 in Quebec, Canada, due to an engine failure. Video was posted by Oldie Fournier, and, well, this is what he captured on camera. They were able to make a successful landing. Even so, it is a very dangerous thing to do because you're on a highway and you don't know if everyone that's driving there is actually paying attention to the fact that an airplane is about to land.
It's a really dangerous thing to have an engine fail and then land on the highway. Where do you suggest that he goes and lands? I think the pilot did a great job landing on the highway. I think it was the safest choice of places for him to land. If the highway was clear, great, he landed right there and he didn't have any problems, so I wouldn't say it was dangerous. And I think it's a little unfair to blame Cessnas here for having the higher risk. The reality is any plane that only has one engine is going to be at the risk of having an engine fail, and then with the engine failing, you don't really have anything propelling you through the sky. That's why on a commercial jet that you fly on as a passenger, there's two. The plane can take off just fine with one. So if you're rolling down the runway and all of a sudden you hear your engine explode and then the plane goes up in the air, the pilots know what we're doing. It's what we trained for all the time. I mean, there's so much training that goes into that exact scenario, so that way we don't ever have a problem with handling everything. You might remember the United situation that happened, I think UA 328, I don't know, I'm just guessing here, but they had that engine failure on takeoff. It wasn't on the ground, but it was on the takeoff portion of the flight. They were able to come back in and land. I did a video where there was a plane that ate a bird at like 100 feet, and they came back in around and land. There's a lot of different scenarios of a plane flying just fine on one engine when you have two. If you have one engine and that dies, well, then you have a problem. If you want to see the video of the plane that ate a bird on takeoff and shut down that engine and flew around and landed on just one, it's in my viral debrief. Check it out right here. And if you want to see me roast some other people who also don't know anything about aviation but continue to put out content all the time on TikTok, check out this video up here. I look forward to hearing from you. Until then, keep the blue side up.